Hey guys. Okay, so I get asked all the time about what sort of mastermind I'm in. I talk a fair amount about the group that I'm in on social media. And so I'm getting questions from you guys all the time about what is a mastermind and why would I get involved in one? And so I wanted to make today's episode all about that for you. And so just to give a little bit of context, if you're not familiar with what a mastermind is, essentially it's a group of people from different backgrounds who get together to help support each other toward reaching their goals. And a lot of times they're business goals. So the one that I'm in, it's like we're all in different types of businesses, but we all bring different varied perspectives and backgrounds to help each other solve problems and accomplish our goals. And in today's episode, I actually bring in the founder of the mastermind that I'm a part of, Jared Kleinert. Jared has accomplished a ridiculous amount in his career. The man is 23 years old. I would never have believed it given what he has done. He's been named by USA Today, America's Most Connected Millennial. He's spoken at TED, TEDx. He's written multiple best-selling books. He worked with Keith Ferrazzi as his very first consulting client at age 18. It's ridiculous what he's done in a short amount of time. And it makes me feel like, oh my God, Elyse, you need to hurry up. You're 10 years older than this man. Anyway, I digress, but I don't know that I have ever taken notes during an episode the way that I did on this one. If you hear typing in the background, I'm trying to quietly take notes because one of my favorite parts is where Jared actually shares the step-by-step, very tactical breakdown of what emails he sends to connect with super influential people. He is connected to some of the most influential people on the planet, and he's done a lot of it literally through cold email. And one of the things that I thought was so cool is he actually offers to give his cold email templates of the exact emails that he used to connect with Keith Ferrazzi and to connect with other high-performing people. So you can download those in the show notes, which is amazing. So please be sure to do that. But there's so much goodness in here. So guys, please be in a place where you can take notes or where you could come back and take notes later if you're driving while you listen to this, because this is really going to give you some tactical tools that you can use to connect with the right types of people that you want to get to know. So you're going to love this conversation. I can't wait for you to listen to it. So sit back and get ready to be amazed at the wisdom that Jared shares. Jared Kleinert, it is awesome to have you on the Instant Impact podcast, my friend. Welcome. Thank you for joining.
Thank you. How quickly can we impact people's lives in this half hour?
You have 5 seconds. Go.
Be a good person, provide value, and be awesome. No.
There you go.
Got to work on that last one, but
that was the episode, folks. We're done. We're gonna go. So, Jared, I think a lot of my network has heard about you just from some of the posts I've been doing about our mastermind, but there's plenty of people who still don't know about what you're up to and the work you're doing in the world. So I'd love if you could share a little bit of your backstory and how you got to where you are and tell us about what you do for people who aren't familiar with you yet.
Sure. Do you want the polished professional bio that you helped me create, or do you want the how I would maybe describe it?
I want the raw nitty gritty. We're neither polished nor professional here.
Okay. I would describe myself as a connector. And so I've spent most of my career, whatever career I've built up to 23 at this point, identifying, connecting with, and befriending top performers. And it started from researching top performing millennials specifically. I started my first business at 15, failed miserably. And part of that was due to poor mentor selection, which we can talk about if you want. But when I was 16, I actually started working for a VC-backed tech company and had a much more positive mentor. And so partly because I was a young entrepreneur, partly because I saw the effects of what good and bad mentorship could do for someone in their career, especially early on. And partly out of a curiosity to meet other young entrepreneurs wherever they were in the world, because I didn't necessarily grow up with a lot of these people. I started doing research around 17 to figure out, who were these top performers from all different walks of life all over the world, who were my peers that were building businesses at young ages, who were the type of people that were high integrity subject matter experts I'd want to learn from as more traditional mentors. And so my career to date and my anything I've done is a result of that network, really. And so the practical outputs of that are I wrote 2 books. One was called 2 Billion Under 20, How Millennials Are Redefining, or how, how millennials are breaking down age barriers and changing the world. And that was with St. Martin's Press. That came out in 2015. I signed the deal for that when I was 18. So I was one of the youngest ever signed business authors in Macmillan's 175-year plus history. And then I wrote another book called 3 Billion Under 30, How Millennials Continue Redefining Success, Breaking Down Age Barriers, Changing the World. And then I was able to speak at TED and TEDx about these sort of things. I was invited to speak with the United Nations and with a lot of Fortune 1000s and a lot of nonprofits and companies like Facebook about what I learned from these top performing millennials. And then, of course, all the while I've wanted to continue learning from great mentors. And so that's when I worked with, consulted for people like Keith Ferrazzi. I picked up other mentors along the way. And you fast forward from 17 when I start this research for real, 15 when I start my first business, to now I have what many people would consider a world-class network. Been fortunate enough to be called USA Today's most connected millennial, which is fun. And yeah, I like sharing what I know on networking and relationship building, because it is, I wouldn't say controversial, but it's not necessarily the first thing you'd think about in the space.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think there is some controversy over how it's done, which I want to get to a little bit later in our conversation, because I've got some specific questions for you there. But yeah, look, at age 23, you've done stuff that most people twice your age haven't. And so that's part of why I was really excited just to build a relationship with you and get to know you and to be in your mastermind. But I want to go back to, you alluded to bad mentorship.
Sure.
At the beginning of what you shared. And I think that it's people can listen and say, oh my God, he's had all these wins and all these big successes, but I know it didn't start that way. So tell us a little bit about that first mentorship experience and what didn't go well and what kind of prompted.
Yeah, I learned early on in my speaking career not to show this guy's mugshot in my slide decks and not to mention names. But my first business mentor, who I basically spent 6 months with on a daily basis from when I was my mid-15s to about 16 years old. I was hanging out with this guy who I later found out had served time in prison for securities fraud on Wall Street. And so here was someone that I trusted, I spent a lot of time with. You could imagine what spending some daily time with for 6 months, that adds up to quite a lot. I don't spend every day with you, and I've known you for a couple of years, but that adds up. And this is someone that I put a lot of trust in. I listened to this person's advice in building my first company, from who I should hire to softwares that I should invest in with the little funds that I had at 15 and 16. And I come to find out, that there wasn't, all the cards weren't on the table, in terms of honesty and in terms of integrity. And so when I found out that this person had a past life where they had spent time in prison, had not done some great things, that was a huge red flag. And there's something to be said about, if you do your time for a crime you've committed and you can get a second chance. But so I wouldn't necessarily have ruled that out just because I got that piece of information. But then I started noticing other habits or character traits that this person possessed, and other instances where there was a lack of integrity. And so right away, I immediately was looking for a much more positive mentor. And when I was goofing off in a high school computer science class, I read an article in Forbes about the most connected man you don't know in Silicon Valley. This guy, David Hassel, he runs a company called 15Five. And the article was all about how he connected, founders of companies like Summit, and people met their spouses through David, and everyone in Silicon Valley, from Tim Ferriss to the founders of PayPal to Warren Buffett's former pilot, a lot of investors and advisors, they all knew about David and respected him. and he had a real impact on people's lives. But he wasn't necessarily in it to celebritize his own brand. He really had a brand of integrity and a brand of expertise in his domain. And so nowadays, that's what I look for in building my network. Is I really want to surround myself with high integrity people first and foremost, and then I want to surround myself with people that have subject matter expertise that can teach me something, or that can help me solve problems in the world or in my business, things like that. So, very important lesson to have that early on. I could have folded it up right then and there and been like, yep, I'm just going to, seek another career path where I don't have to run into these type of people. But I'm very glad it happened. And, it happened when the stakes were kind of low, because then I learned that I really needed to be more conscious about who I spent time with and who I surrounded myself with. And because of that level of intentionality, I've had the privilege of working with so many incredible people, and calling many of these really world-class talents my friends these days.
Yeah. Well, and there's value in contrast, right? And I would imagine that experience is a lot of what prompted you to say, wow, it really matters who I surround myself with. And who I spend time with. So
and sorry to interrupt, but if you take nothing away from this conversation other than to be intentional about who you surround yourself with, and what you learn from them, then that would be the biggest takeaway. Is like, be intentional about who you spend time with.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I really wondered about when I first met you is I had heard that Keith Ferrazzi was your first consulting client. And you were how old when you worked with Keith, when you started working with Keith?
I was 18.
Which is nuts. So, so for people—
Sure, looking back on it, it's a little weird. Yeah.
So I think most people have probably heard of Keith. If you haven't, he wrote a book. What was his book, Never Eat Alone?
Yep, he wrote a book called Never Eat Alone, which was a #1 New York Times bestselling book. It sold millions of copies. He was formerly the chief marketing officer of Deloitte, and one of the youngest in the Fortune 500 when he was the C-suite officer. He was also a CMO of Starwood Hotels, which you've probably stayed at if you're listening to this. And he went to Yale, Harvard, came from pretty humble beginnings. He's definitely a genius when it comes to social interactions and in studying that. Nowadays, he helps major companies build high impact teams and sort of take the networking and relationship building advice he gives professionals and try and have that happen at a organizational level. But yeah, by all intents and purposes, like a true thought leader, not just someone who says that they are a thought leader, but has really like influenced millions of people through his work.
So here's what I'm curious about is I want to get into like the nitty gritty, the tactical details of how to get in touch with people who are operating at that level, how to build relationships with them. And I think it might be helpful if you could share like the details of how you connected with Keith, how you started working with him, and how you like built that relationship. Because a lot of people listening want to figure out, how do I build better relationships in my network, my business? So take us through how the heck you did that at age 18.
Do you have show notes with your show?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll offer anyone listening to go into Elyse's show notes. I'll give you a series of cold email templates that has like the word for word of what I sent Keith and how I broke it down. And and actually someone who was in one of my Facebook groups recently emailed me saying that they had used the cold email templates to raise their seed round of funding for their tech startup, and they're in like the aerospace industry. So someone who's a brilliant like actual rocket scientist and engineer who went to, had worked at SpaceX and NASA. He's pretty young. He's one of those top performing millennials I'm mentioning. But yeah, he swiped a lot of these cold email templates and more importantly, the methodology behind it, and reached out to like the Mark Cubans of the world, to the Drapers of the world, and ended up closing a round of over $1 million in about 6 months. But wow. So I'll give you the templates. the way I would approach it is to, again, be intentional about who you're reaching out to and why you're reaching out to them, and ultimately find ways to provide value. And so if we look at each of those, if you want to be intentional about who you're reaching out to, when I reached out to Keith, I reached out because of three things. One, I wanted to learn from a New York Times bestselling author, because I had just signed a book deal for my first book. And if someone's been on the New York Times bestselling author list, they've sold like 10,000 plus books in a week. And so, rather than just reaching out to anyone and everyone that I could consult for or get a job with or things like, or, have as a mentor, I was trying to narrow the field down. And so, one criteria was they had to be a New York Times bestselling author. Two is they had to have thought leadership in the space of networking and relationship building, because I wanted to continue building that up as my skill set and my zone of genius. I was coming off of working with the most connected man you don't know in Silicon Valley. To close that story, I'd sent him a cold email in similar fashion, and ended up working with his company for 2 years, going from unpaid intern to being an early team member at his startup. The startup recently announced their Series A round of funding at over $8 million, and maybe now 60 or 70 people strong. A lot of the biggest companies in the world use their technology. So I was coming off of the experience working for the most connected man you don't know in Silicon Valley, off of the negative mentor experience. So I was trending in a positive direction in terms of this networking skill set, and I wanted to continue learning about that. So, number one, I was looking for a New York Times bestselling author. Two, I was looking for someone who was known as a connector or a networker, or someone with expertise there. And then three, I was thinking about what skill set I could bring to the table. And the only experience I really had at that point was with 15Five. And so I was thinking about, contacting people in enterprise software, in B2B services, in the world of like employee engagement and culture management, So I was very specific in who I reached out to. And so with that criteria in mind, I made a quick list of like 10 people. Like Keith Ferrazzi was on there, Adam Grant was on there, Jim Collins and his team was on there. It was 5 or 10 people. And then, so already I went from reaching out to anyone and everyone to like very specific people. And so, I would do the same if you were looking for dream clients for your new business. I would do the same if you're looking to raise a round of funding. Whatever your need is for wanting to connect this intent, with this level of intentionality, really think about that first. Even if you're trying to get a new job, think about what your dream job is, down to like the number of employees that company would have, what your title would be, who you'd be working with, where, et cetera. So I got pretty intentional. Then I crafted an email. As far as an email breakdown, again, you could look at the show notes, but, so I won't take up too much time on this, but step one with writing any email effectively is to use the subject line to your advantage. That's really valuable real estate. And, I would do one of a few things whenever possible. One is I would personalize it. So sometimes I will actually include like my entire message in the subject line. And that too is like specificity can be helpful. So, it could be like, hey, Keith, or it could be, hey, Keith, reaching out about XYZ, even if you can fit in the subject line. So that, specificity, personalization. If you can't do those things, maybe try and spark intrigue. One of my favorite subject lines is quick question, ... That almost always gets opened. And so, the main point is just to get them to open the email. And so there's a bunch of different ways to do that. And I explained in the breakdown of the email templates, but that's, where I start. And then to open the email, you always provide value up front. So that requires doing more research and being intentional. And, with Keith specifically, when I reached out, I noticed that he was about to do Never Eat Alone Expanded and Updated. Mm-hmm. And so I reached out and said, hey, Keith, I would like to help you promote Never Eat Alone Expanded and Updated. with these ideas in mind. And so it was providing value up front. Then I backed it up, by saying my name is Jared Kleinert. I'm a 18-year-old author to be with Macmillan, TEDx speaker, and early team member at 15.5 with clients like these companies. And so you provide value up front, show that you can actually help them do that. That you're not just talking the talk, but you can walk the walk. And then make it easy for them to take that next step with you. So I would say, I said, hey, can we talk on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern for 15 minutes? If not, how about Wednesday at 10 a.m. Eastern for 15 minutes? I'll call you. Just let me know what your number is. So yeah, we're getting in the weeds here, but
no, this is we want, like, this is so good, guys. This is gold. It is like super specific. I don't know that I've ever taken notes on a podcast interview. I'm trying to type quietly as I take notes. Oh my God, I need to do this. So
yeah, and I'll again make sure to reference those templates. But that's how I approached it. With Keith, he was the fastest to respond. And then I did this with like about 10 people and most of them responded, got on the phone with a few people. But ultimately Keith was the best fit for what I was looking for. One thing you won't find in the templates is I would make sure you follow up as well. And so because someone doesn't open or answer your email, doesn't mean that they don't want to talk to you. They just may be really busy, or maybe they saw it, but and wanted to respond, but sort of left it in their inbox to do it another time and they got busy. Or maybe they wanted to formulate a better response for you. And so I would follow up typically like 3 days after my initial email, 2 days if you want to be really aggressive, but 2 to 3 days. And then I would actually follow up a second time about a week after your initial email. If you want to get very aggressive, you can do a third and sort of email, which in the internet marketing world, they would typically refer to as a breakup email, where you would say like, hey, obviously you're on vacation, or you hate me, or you don't want to talk to me. No worries, but here's my number, in case you ever want to contact me.
Are you mixing in different types of contacts throughout that too? Like, are you sending social media messages? Are you DMing? Are you
Yeah, great question. So this is just email. And I try and keep it pretty simple with following up. I mean, you can make it, you can be that intentional with following up and maybe add more insight to your follow-up, email, or provide different ways that you can provide value, or sort of give them another case for answering you. But a lot of times I'll just say, hey, checking in, or hey, following up. If you're playful, you can use GIFs. I love using GIFs in follow-up. And like you just like go to Google and type in like follow-up GIFs, and like you'll get a bunch of funny ones of like Dumbledore like being like, what's going on? Or there's like one that's like the Cookie Monster is just like tapping his desk like, I'm waiting.
I don't know if I could pull off Dumbledore.
Yeah. It takes a certain type of person to like want to send those, but I happen to be somewhat playful. To answer your question though, what I've done sometimes in the past is I will look to where those people prefer to communicate, because a lot of times not everyone likes email. I prefer text message. If someone texts me, they'll get a much faster response than email. If I've reached out to people to have them in my books as contributors, a lot of times I will tweet at them right after I send them an email saying, hey, I just sent you an email about, and then, being featured in an award-winning book series, or like something like that, like making it super juicy for them to like want to go check their email. So so you can mix it up. You can go to multiple platforms without being stalkerish. The important thing there is to really think about making it easy for them, and so if they prefer to communicate in one way, then communicate with them in that regard. If someone tweets at my account, like I almost never check Twitter, and so that I clearly don't prefer that method of communication if someone's reaching out to me. But if someone Instagrams me, that may work because I don't use Instagram a lot. But that's also means I don't get a lot of messages. But if someone texts me, then I know that they have my personal contact info. Email is cool. But yeah, it depends on the other person. And what else? Download a tool called Mixmax if you haven't already, because that will allow you to see if people have opened your emails. You can save some templates, which will help you. That'll give you some scheduling capability, like a Calendly. You can send emails at a later time. They have a cool feature where it'll help you think through the best time to send someone an email. So it has a little bit of like artificial intelligence that'll say, email this person at 7:21 p.m. So yeah, hopefully that will instantly impact your ability to email.
You've done it. You've done it. That was seriously so, like, I love the specifics and the actionable steps that you just gave. That was brilliant. So
yeah, you got it.
Yeah, thank you. So I want to pivot a little bit, and I want to get your thoughts on this. So I did a video maybe 2 weeks ago. It was actually following our mastermind event. So Jared is the leader of my mastermind that I'm in, Meeting of the Minds, and we had an event in Atlanta. And I did a video afterwards called, it was like the not so popular truth about how to connect with influential people. And the punchline was basically, look, a lot of times, if you want to be surrounded by influential people, you got to pay. Like, it's a pay to play type of thing, pony up the money to be in the groups, to go to the events, to be where they are. And it was like a firestorm.
Right. Yeah, I saw that LinkedIn post.
The response. Yeah. A lot of people were like, yes, thank you for talking about this because it's true. And thank you for just being honest about it. But then there were also a lot of people who really didn't like it. And they were like, you shouldn't have to pay to have access to people. This is BS. Like, you're just sucking up to people. So I want to hear from you, your thoughts on that. I mean, I think I know what you're going to say, but I'm curious to hear your perspective as someone who leads a group and also has probably paid to be in groups as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would question I would investigate who said what in terms of response to you. I'm sure the people that responded favorably to what you said focus on personal development. They may have businesses that are growing pretty quickly, or they may be coming from a different set of experiences than people who have negatively responded to that post of yours, and maybe have invested in groups before that weren't great, and now they're that sort of whole industry is tarnished for them, or they haven't ever attempted it, and so they're just sort of protecting their ego of not having made that investment in themselves. But I think it's like anything else. Again, it goes back to intentionality. Like, what are you trying to accomplish, by when, and what is the what's at stake for you accomplishing it or not accomplishing it? And so, if you focus on health, as a sort of a comp, there are people that are going to invest in a gym membership and in a trainer and in healthy food. And they're going to be very diligent about that. So is it crazy that they're spending lots, $300 a month on a CrossFit gym and a trainer and this and that? Maybe, but probably not if they're trying to become healthier for their family and show off that six pack over the summer. Like, they probably have reasons for making that investment and wanting to develop personally, and they're probably going to get faster results than someone that only invested in the gym membership and didn't invest in the trainer, or someone who only invests in a pair of running shoes but hasn't invested in the gym or the trainer. And they're definitely all going to get more results than someone who is on their couch just watching television and yelling about CrossFit. And so it's like anything else. If you're growing a business, and you don't spend anything on marketing, sure, you can build your business through a lot of outbound, sales, or a lot of referrals, or there are ways to accomplish your goals. But typically, if you invest in marketing, the quicker you do that, and with more volume that you do that, the faster you'll grow. That's why startups are raising, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars to grow as quickly as possible, because there's a window of opportunity. And success or failure is like their company's at stake. And so it's the same with your network. If you're trying to accomplish things that are important to your family or your industry or both, I know a lot of people in Meeting of the Minds have some sort of vision for how their community should be changed for the better, how their industry should be changed for the better. These people are doing really important work. And so it accelerates their ability to carry out that vision, to invest in their networking and their relationship building, and just cut down the time it takes to build that world-class network. Yeah. And so, you invest in Meeting of the Minds, you then get to leverage all the trust and curation and networking and relationship building that I've done with all the other members and the alumni and the mentors we bring in, all that. And so you don't have to build those few hundred relationships or, whatever by yourself. You can sort of, instead of starting at ground zero, you're starting, much higher. So it saves you time, it saves you money because you don't have to fly around and do coffees or go to other conferences or events. You can just, go straight to Meeting of the Minds if you're looking to meet those certain types of people. And you have some skin in the game too. So you're investing in yourself, which is a great story to tell yourself, but then you also want to get a return naturally. And so you're going to do the work necessary to follow up with people, to deepen those relationships, to transition those relationships into strategic insights and advice that you can then use to build your business, or partnerships, or new clients, something like that, in order to get that ROI. So I guess in short, there's always reasons for doing something or not doing something. I would question the backgrounds of the people that responded negatively to your post, but for most people, if they have the ability to, or I would always invest in yourself to the level you can. And so some people, that may mean picking up Keats' book at $20, and that's all they can do right now. And then there's some people who have grown to a point where they can invest a few $100s to go to a conference, or invest in a flight to go meet someone in person that they admire. And then there's going to be people that can make the 4 or 5 figure investments into mastermind groups. Those people are typically running 6 and 7 figure businesses, and so they have the ability to do that. It's a marketing or a business expense, and they can also sort of get the return much more quickly than other people. And so there's definitely context to those investments, but I would always bet on yourself and bet on investing in yourself. I'm not alone. People like Warren Buffett have said like they would invest in themselves before the stock market all day long, and you're never going to fail by investing in yourself, whether it's through investing in your network or investing in your health or anything else.
Yeah. And I'll say too, I was the girl who went to college and was like, I will never join a sorority. I feel like that's so fake. I feel like you shouldn't have to pay for your friends. And I feel differently now. I think if you don't pay for certain friendships with certain people, it's like you kind of get what you get, and that's okay. And it's not like I have probably most of my friends I've met just naturally through.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Yeah,
but I guess it's more like if you really want to surround yourself and build relationships with people who are, like you said, 6, 7, 8 figure business owners, or who are making a massive impact in the world. Most of the time, the fastest way to do that is to pay to be in the type of room that they're in. And there's
so I wouldn't say you're investing in the friendships. I'd say you're investing in the access, in the environment. Because even if you don't talk to anyone in those sort of environments, like you're already going to want to develop much more quickly. You're going to have a feeling of accountability to accomplishing your goals. You're going to see what other people who are successful look like and how they act, and so it's already a game-changing environment. And once you're in those environments, then it's up to you to be a good person, be yourself, provide value. So it's the same stuff you'd be doing if you met someone at a coffee shop or if you met someone through an outbound email. It's just, it makes it a lot quicker to make that investment if you trust the curator behind a community, if you trust the qualifying process to get those people in that environment. So you're not necessarily paying for friendships, you're just paying for speed of meeting those sort of people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And deepening those relationships. Like you'll probably deepen those relationships, for over days or weeks as opposed to months and years.
Years, yeah. And a lot of those people do end up becoming friends as well, which I really love. It's like we can spur each other on to be better. And then I really love and admire them and they become friends. It's a win-win. So I want to take a moment and ask so there's a lot of people who listen who are in masterminds or considering one. But once you find yourself in one, what would you say are some of the best ways to carry yourself? I know you mentioned like being yourself, contributing. I think some people go in and they immediately are like, how can I get my return on investment back as fast as possible? Oh my God, I just spent 10,000, 20,000, 100,000. That doesn't really work, right? If you have like that desperation. So walk us through, what are some of the best ways to maximize an experience and to contribute as much as possible once you've made that investment?
Yeah, so I'll just use Meeting of the Minds as an example. So we have a trial membership component to our community, and then we have an annual membership component. Elyse is an annual member, but for a trial member, and this is part of how we make sure that the annual membership has the highest integrity possible. But you have to start as a trial member. Like you can't become an annual member until you do a trial. A trial is attending one of our 3-day Meeting of the Minds experiences in person. And going into that, I will talk to a trial member, on the phone a couple times, make sure they're a good fit for the group, ask what their goals are, what would constitute a solid return on investment for their time and money and energy invested. And there's a few things I tell them to do sort of before they show up in person. The first is I have them, think about and be intentional about what type of things they're hoping to accomplish. And so, that could be journaling, here's the biggest business challenges that I have right now, or here's the biggest opportunities I have in front of me. And where are the question marks in all this? Because that's the whole point of having a meeting of the minds, is that our problems won't solve themselves, and that if we can establish a multidisciplinary approach to solving those problems, we're going to be able to grow our companies much faster, solve problems in our community, change the world, truly, not just talk about it. And so, if you're stuck with marketing or personal branding or sales, it's important to be aware of that first and foremost. And so, I have people, and we do this through like an intake form, but I have people think about like, what are the biggest challenges that I have currently, or what are the opportunities in front of me, just to get some clarity on what they need help with initially. Then, I would have them think about the types of people they're looking to meet. And so I always challenge people not to single out individuals. So you're not really trying to meet Gary Vaynerchuk. You're trying to meet someone that runs a 9-figure business, who also has a popular presence on social media, who does some angel investing and writes books. So I have people think about the type of person they're looking to meet, who would help them solve that problem. So if they're establishing their own meeting of the minds, who are the diverse experts they need to be talking to? And so, they may journal on the types of partnerships they're looking to create, the types of clients that they're looking to bring on, the types of vendors they need, the mentors they're looking for, the other domain experts. If we have like a world-renowned architect in our community who sorely needs help with fundraising and sales to some extent. So these are some of the other experts that he needs to surround himself with for his own meeting of the minds. And so the more someone can do to prepare for an event, the better, just to be aware of that. But then also on the flip side, just going into it with an open mind, looking for what is a great practice, or what's a great insight from a completely different space that you could bring into your own world, and have that innovative idea. With Apple and Steve Jobs, a lot of the design insights came from like a calligraphy class that he like stumbled into in college. And so you wouldn't normally think like technology and calligraphy class, but when you take those disparate ideas and like smash them together, that's where the innovative insights come from. And so that's, while you have to be prepared going into these things to be aware of the value you're looking to receive, also having an open-mindedness to what you can't predict or can't plan for is definitely important. So there's all that. When you're there, in these type of environments, it's sort of counterintuitive because you've already invested time in traveling to the event. You've invested money in attending these things. Maybe it's taken you hours to travel. So there's an energy that you've invested. Now you move stuff off your calendar to like focus on this event. You have to keep giving and keep investing. And so then, investing your attention into listening to what other people need and investing in building those relationships so that when other people give you advice and give you their insights, you actually trust what they're saying, and you feel a sense of obligation to leverage what they're giving you and actually use it in the open world. Like if the strangers that keep walking by me gave me advice, like I don't have much incentive to actually follow up with that. But if you give me advice, or if you give me a connection or an introduction, we have a certain relationship where I both value what you're saying and trust that it's with my best interests at heart, and I also have a sense of accountability or obligation to leverage that connection or follow up or do things. And so that's sort of what is happening during these masterminds, and it happens without you thinking about it. That's when everyone's at the bar drinking the night the night before we officially start, or we've gone on boats and hung out and gone cliff jumping and other stuff to have fun and bond. And that's all what's happening from a facilitative standpoint. And I sort of, that's part of my job as the curator, is to make sure these things are happening. So that, having an open-mindedness, continuing to invest in those relationships, obviously taking some solid notes so that you have different items to follow up on afterwards is a good idea. We have part of our events where we have a session called facilitated follow-ups, where we have people actually sit down and start sending follow-up emails and follow-up calendar reminders. I think that's really important, and that's a way to maximize the opportunity you have in these events. The goal, if you're going to a mastermind experience, is not to solve all your problems right then and there, but it's really to build and deepen those relationships with the type of people that can help you solve those problems in the future, and who can introduce you to their networks of people who can help you solve those problems.
Yeah.
Because not only, when you invest in Meeting of the Minds, for example, you're able to leverage the trust that I have with my network and the curation behind that. But then if you meet Elyse, and Elyse starts introducing you to people, suddenly you're leveraging the trust that Elyse has with her network and the level of curation that she's put behind all that. And so, even when you're building a network outside of a mastermind, that's partly how I built my network very quickly over time. Is it really only took talking to David, who was a Superconnector, and then when David introduced me to a handful of other Superconnectors, I was building off of the trust and the intimacy and relationship that I had with David, and onward. And it's my job to keep that trust and keep building those bridges. But that's sort of the exponential effect that you have with a mastermind group. I'm rambling a bit, but because there's so much to uncover. But
Well, I think one thing I'll say, and I'll just kind of highlight what you said as we wrap here, is one point I really want to drive home that you made is there's a give and a take. And
Sure.
I think the key, anytime you invest in, you're positioning yourself around a lot of amazing people who can help you, is really to focus on how can I give, and generosity. And so I love what you said about being intentional, going in with goals, not necessarily being super attached to the who, but more just being available for, hey, here's the type of person who I'd really like to meet. But then one of the things that I'm always focused on with anyone I'm having a face-to-face with or an email follow-up with is who do I know that they should know? How can I help them? How can I serve them? And it's kind of just one of those energy circulation things where I really try to go in and actually not ask too much. I love that there's opportunities to ask questions and ask for help. And when those come up, I do, but I really focus first on how can I fill that, like that piggy bank with tons of value for everyone in there, so that if I ever do need somebody's help, I feel good about reaching out and asking. So I think like, if you can go in with generosity in mind, with focusing on how you can give and how you can serve,
Mm-hmm.
then it'll come back to you. You don't necessarily know when or how, but it always does. And I think
Yeah.
that's the way to probably really go in and excel in an environment like that.
Yeah. And you've done a good job, leveraging meeting in the minds, and, like we had talked about, different, uh, setups that you should have in targeting ideal clients versus just any sort of client. We also had talked, both with the group and then individually, about your relationship with brand builders, and sort of how you, where you are on that team, and how to maximize your expertise. And so Elyse could have gotten that advice from anyone, but it's partly because of the investment she made in the group and the relationship that was built between us and between Elyse and other people in the community. She felt a sense of obligation to act on those things much more quickly than if she just heard this advice from a stranger at Starbucks, which might have been good advice, or maybe she read it in a book, but it's a different level of emotional investment into carrying out what you need to do, because we all like know typically like what we need to do to like move ourselves forward, but then there's all the emotional baggage or blockage that prevents us from that. So I think these environments, even outside of the people, like really push you to make those changes, and it's part of how we even structure our events, is we have people get up in front of the entire room and say, hey, I'm going to do this thing as a result of all your advice and the hour that we just spent on a hot seat together, where 6 or 8 people were helping me think through my biggest business challenge or the biggest opportunity that I had.
Yeah.
And that's an important component of it, because it's not just the give, but it's also, then you have to, it's the give of all the advice, but then you have to do something with it. Otherwise, why would people keep giving you advice?
I think that, yeah, that's the biggest thing. It's just like I remember we masterminded my course, my video confidence course that I'm creating. And like the next morning I created a video.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, that's done. So you just have to, the act of paying for something makes you value it so much more. And then you just have to take action on it.
Yeah. And like Elyse says, like I invest in personal development. I spend, thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars flying around the world every single year to meet people, to host events where I'm, going out of pocket to pay for dinners and to put on events and use like breather spaces, throw conferences. I attend events. Like I attended the brand builders workshop that they had in November. I have an executive coach that I invest in. And so I'm also walking the walk here and want to grow myself. And it is such a night and day. There's very few people that don't need to make that investment in order to accomplish those goals. And even if you look at like The Rock, or like, Mark Wahlberg, any of these, like anyone that in Hollywood who like wakes up at like 3:30 or 4 a.m. to like get their workout in, and then, have their like perfect day ahead of them. Like they all have coaches, they all have nutritionists, they all have, people who are giving them advice, and if anything else, just accountability to get things done. So LeBron invests over $1 million in his body and nutrition and health every single year, and that's why he's going to hit $1 billion in terms of his net worth, probably like 3 to 5 years after he retires.
Yeah.
I'm sure Meryl Streep has acting coaches. Like, so what makes it that we don't need executive coaches, or that we don't need this sort of access? If you need any more proof, like with these mastermind groups, this is where like people who are like Sarah Blakely, like billionaires, spend their weekends at these mastermind events. And like the biggest thought leaders in the world, like they'll fly all around the country and spend upwards of 6 figures a year investing in these sort of things. And they're the last people in the world that you think would need, new friends. But they're investing again in that speed, in that quality of environment, in the curation element of it, in the accountability aspect of it. And that's part of why they just keep, success is just like being thrown at them. And, they just make it everything happen.
Yeah. Well, I will just say, if you can get The Rock to join our mastermind, I'd be excited about that. So let's see what we can do about that.
I mean, we do have a mutual connection.
There you go. I fully expect it. 2020, The Rock.
One of our alumni for Meeting of the Minds rented him a place in Atlanta when he came to shoot one of his movies in town.
That's awesome. Well,
So,
hey,
there you go.
This was awesome, Jared. Thank you so much. I mean, seriously, like
Sure.
many actionable ideas. And so I would really, really encourage each of you to go check the show notes for this episode, grab those downloads, because that is worth gold, worth its weight in gold. Definitely start using those. And then Jared, if people want to connect with you, if they want to learn about Meeting of the Minds, tell us all the places where people can go to find you and learn more.
Yeah, so we'll include a link in the show notes to learn more about Meeting of the Minds and about your experiences Meeting of the Minds. That'll be go.3billionunder30.com/Elyse, but it'll be in the show notes eventually. And then you are free to contact me, just jaredkleinert@gmail.com. Happy to chat with anyone who reaches out. You'd be surprised how few people reach out. I've been on shows that go to millions of YouTube subscribers and 5 people reach out.
Oh my God.
So
okay. We have to have at least 6 people reach out from this. So guys, I need at least 6 of you, please, to send.
But reach out and let me know how I can be helpful, or if you want to try pulling one of the cold email templates on me, and reversing it, sort of Jedi mind tricking me. Go for it. I enjoy that. If you want to just send me your favorite GIF, I would also appreciate that, and it'd make me laugh. But yeah, I'm pretty accessible, so feel free to email me anytime. Find me on social media. Definitely check out Meeting of the Minds, especially if you're a small business owner that's running a bootstrapped company, and you have a small team with you, but wants to make it a larger team and have a vision for the future. We're looking for some real visionaries to join our tribe here. And other than that, thank you again for the opportunity. Always nice jumping on your podcast and hanging out with you. And I will, I'll see you soon in Atlanta, definitely before this comes out.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time, for your expertise, for all the wisdom you gave. And I learned a ton. Like I said, I took a bunch of notes, and I know everybody listening did as well. So you are appreciated, my friend.
You got it. And do you like the fact that I had this E for Elyse with us the whole time?
Yeah.
I personalized this show just for you.
If you're just listening, you should check out the video on my YouTube channel, because Jared does have a giant E behind him. So
it's a WeWork space. It's not a big deal, folks. It's just WeWork. But no, we did pick conference room E for Elyse.
That makes me so happy. It made my day.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thanks, Jared. So appreciate your time. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. I can't wait to hear your thoughts in the comments, and please do reach out to Jared. He is super accessible, and I know he'd love to connect with you. So I will see you all again on our next episode. Bye-bye.